Hello and welcome back to Crew Parley. Normally on this channel we do Parley, my on-the-spot responses to the prompts you folks submit. And this is the reverse of that. I submit the prompt, you all respond, and then I guess I respond to your responses. I heard you like responses, so here's some responses to your responses so we can respond while we respond. Except that the topic this time is meta time, prompting prompts. I heard you like to be prompted, so I prompted you to prompt so we can prompt while we prompt. Submit to me what you think would be good Crew Parley prompts in the future. Easy for me to say. What do you think makes a good Crew Parley prompt? Or what interests you about this system? Any pitfalls you have in mind? A few of you have already weighed in, and I thought that was very interesting, so let me hear what everyone has to say. I think it's a good time for me to learn what would make a good Crew Parley prompt. I've completely broken that phrase from my brain, so show me what you've got, fire away. Yes, I feel like I've tried enough. This is about the year anniversary of doing Crew Parley this way, and I'm not that good at them, in my opinion. I don't have a very good sense for what makes a good one, so it's time to reflect. I do think it's good to be patient. I'm not going to get it right immediately, sure, but I've had time to learn. Now I think it would be beneficial to have some better direction. And of course, we've done them for a while, right? Like people have done them enough that if I ask you what would make a good one, well, you've done a good handful of them, some of you, and so you could know that. I was hoping, and I'll ask this again once in the future, I would imagine, that some people who've just been listening to them would also maybe choose the way in now. There's a very large group of people that have access to Crew Parlay that are at my $5 tier or whatever. Most of them are Twitch subscribers because I treat that as a $5 tier. That could use this service, that do pay or have been paid for this service, but that don't use it. I was hoping in my deep heart that some people would have been watching these and enjoying them but hadn't weighed in, and then I would say, hey, what direction do you want these to go in? And they would go, oh, I liked this one or whatever. Maybe I should have said, which one of these do you like that's another thing. I'm just bad at prompting these, I guess, because I don't want to be too specific, but that will come up a lot in this Crew Parlay. But I'm just going to get into your responses because they were really useful. I just wanted to say they were very useful. Thank you. It isn't that hard to learn better when you have people responding about something we're working on together, but it was very helpful. I appreciate that. Crew Parlay is a useful, interesting little system. We have a network of people that aren't very similar in general, but we do have similar, I call it thought technology, ways of communicating or standards or maxims of behavior that are generally similar. A lot of communities on the internet behave as if they have those things, but don't. And I think it's especially valuable to be in a community where we have some standards. The community is about things. We have a way we do things here in general, but otherwise we have basically nothing to do with each other, all of us here. This is really good. This is a different benefit from friends, a little bit closer to something like being colleagues, is how I often think of it. And this is valuable in a unique way. I think this is a great group of people, a great social climate, if you will, to ask certain kinds of questions. But what kinds of questions, right? That could be a useful thing. We can kind of weigh in on stuff, but obviously asking for, I've lauded your ability to give me good video game recommendations. I have what amounts to a powerful laser targeting system for video game recommendations. You folks just do not miss with video game recommendations. My word, they're so good. And it makes sense. We spend a lot of time talking about that, of course. So what would be other ways to do that? And maybe a little less selfish. Yeah, I've liked most of the prompts that I've designed for myself. I want you to get the benefit as well. So anyway, let's get into a few responses. So a lot of these, you've included some prompts you think would be good. I will group those in the latter half of the parlay, and I'll read your responses about what would make a good prompt first. There were some really good responses for, like, you should do this as a prompt. I totally will. I think they were all really good ideas. I'll put those at the end of the prompt. So a lot of these will be like half of the person's reply, and then the other half with their prompt suggestions will be later. Just Rusty, let's go. I think for Crew Parlay, I like prompts which can be answered with relative brevity and are pretty narrow in focus. Not a flaming hot take to get us started, makes total sense to me, yep. For games, I like parlay prompts that focus on quite specific mechanics. The one key change prompt and the janky mechanics prompt are ones I liked. I also like the ones about quotes, as I thought it had quite a good format to slot into, rather than having to make our own framework to reply. Let's read that prompt, the one about quotes from me. This was from a little while ago, November 2024. Hit me with your biggest quotes, phrases, sayings, and such. They don't have to be famous. I don't care who said them. It may very well just be something you think is useful, and I won't hold it against you if it doesn't apply universally or something. These don't need to be the building blocks of reality. Just interesting, useful maxim type things. Let's say 2 or 3 with a little explanation, or just one if you have a lot. Show me what you got. I guess I see what you mean. So the slotting in is like you just find a quote and then respond about it, or like 2 or 3 and a little explanation. I'm not, in what I am saying right now, trying to argue whether you are right or not that it's a format to slot into. I hear you. Like, for you, it was that thing. My objection is only, I guess I don't see it that way, and so how can I see it the way you're seeing it and then make prompts that are like that? I guess it's kind of a thing to slot into, right? Like you have a quote in mind, and then you give a little response blurb. Let me open the responses to that really quick. And they are kind of like that. Like you do the quote, and then you do a little response to it. I guess people did kind of do that. Interesting. Yeah, I can definitely see that thing, and it is a good formula for good discussion to start with a just an, sort of an object and then a perspective on that object. I'm not exactly sure how to say otherwise. It's not that it needs to be like a factoid or something objective first, but the idea that you kind of begin with a solid concept and then move away from that concept is a very good way to structure abstract discussions. Something I always find very frustrating in my personal life and beyond is I feel people are quite fixated on specifics and won't for some reason people can be quite sticky with abstracting or drawing a broader conclusion. I can think of reasons why this would be, but I feel like they don't add up. I feel like for almost every topic, it is better to not generalize, but like universalize, take the ideas from that subject and see where else they apply. That is a more effective way to approach most subjects, but people have a very strong bulk of resistance to that behavior, and I don't know why that is fully. I've thought about it a lot in my life, so obviously I have some thoughts about where that might be coming from. And obviously, having that annoyance means I've thought a lot about what you can do to counter it. I can definitely see that having there be some, um, like, you don't want to feel like you're asking the audience to do homework to respond to this prompt. Go look up a quote, go find a quote that you like, and then respond to it. But if you look at it another way, like, that's not a huge ask. Like, that's not that hard to do. A lot of people might just have one that's stuck in their head, though putting them on the spot may make it hard to figure out what it is. We'll get into that later. But then with that relatively small ask, it's then pretty easy to discuss the thing. Sure, it's not so bad. Maybe I'm a little allergic to the idea that I would be giving the audience something like homework. I don't want it to be perceived that way. And then as a result, I I avoid what would be a good structure for a prompt. A lot of this parlay is why am I doing it wrong so consistently? And I hope you that doesn't sound like me beating myself up. I'm having fun trying to improve at this. Like it's okay. I don't care that I did it that badly. I did my best, and then I used that experience to ask you all to help me learn. It went great. Like I guess it would have gone better if I had magically known how to do it well from the start, but I didn't. Like that's fine. I will be taking the piss out of some of my techniques for doing prompts in this parlay, and that's like it's fine. I don't like hate myself for not doing it perfectly immediately, but I think it was bad in many cases, so it's fine. We'll learn from there. So yeah, I get that. The one key change and janky mechanics things. The one key change one, yeah, it's an easy one to respond to say, like, I like this thing, but here's a thing I don't like. It's interesting when you put people on the spot and say, what's your favorite ice cream flavor or whatever. People often, for a question like that, well, they have a pretty prepared answer. But if it's something they haven't thought about that much before, and you ask them the question, and it's formatted like, what is the one thing or the best thing or whatever, I like to harp on this subject a lot. Something about this breaks people's brains. People become bad at answering that type of question when you ask it, formulated that way. And a good way to counter it is to not ask for just one thing. Interestingly, I've found a decent tactic for countering it is also to ask for a bad thing, like ask for a complaint about the thing. I'm not sure why that is, like singling out a negative thing rather than a positive thing. I think it is maybe partly because one of the many reasons why people are put on the spot when you say what's your favorite thing or whatever is because you're asking them to express their value assignment to a thing. Like, what is the thing you will die on the hill on? That's not the only reason that it fries people's brains to ask them for their one favorite thing. There are many other reasons. At least in my opinion, I would love and probably have done a whole parlay just on that subject. But one of the pitfalls that some people experience is that you're kind of asking them to like box their personality a little bit. And they go, well, but if I tell you my one favorite thing and it's this, you're going to assume all these things about me. But then if I say it's that, then blah, 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 you know. And it turns out that simplifying yourself in basically any way is bad. And so a person sufficiently aware of that will not want to respond to anything. Buts. And it is buts. But I think that one of the things that works about saying what is a bad thing about this is that you're saying it's like it's a good thing. You know, you like this thing, you're interested in this game or whatever. But what is the thing you might change about it? I find that this is getting involved in its process in a way that doesn't feel like I'm dying on the hill of this thing is bad or, you know, I'm dying on the hill that this thing is good. And personally, I've had a lot of success with people who have trouble giving an answer like that. If you ask it this way, they'll often be willing to be critical. You can't say something like, hey, that book series you like, tell me the bad things about it. That doesn't work as well for whatever reason. And I've often found it's more successful to say, what would make you like it even more if you could change something about it? Or was there something you wanted that you would like, something you liked about it that you want even more of in it? Is often more effective. So that's interesting. Definitely, it's only one piece of the puzzle of asking Crew Parley to find things that do not put people on the spot. And as somebody who's good at avoiding being put on the spot, I'm surprisingly not that good at avoiding putting other people on the spot about these things. Perhaps because I'm used to getting around, like people just do put me on the spot and I have mental tools for getting out of that situation. And so to me, it's like, oh, you don't have to avoid doing that, but it would be nice to. So in summary, I definitely get the appeal of these, where it's like if you don't have to pass a strict value judgment, I think that is comfy. And you know, Crew Parley is a service. It's something that people have paid for, or in some form supported me for. A lot of people with Twitch Prime have this, but haven't directly paid for it. Sure, but I'm getting paid money for it. You know, it's a service that you got in some way, purchased in some way. So it's meant to be that they are fun questions to answer. I think that part of that service, I hope you'll agree, ought to be that it is like designed to be comfortable to answer them. There's nothing so terrible about asking people for something that does put them a little bit on the spot. I mean, you might decide you don't prefer that, but I hope you'll agree it's no great crime to do that, sure. But is it not better to just err on the side of not doing that for something like this? I feel like it is, don't you think? So, um, not putting people on the spot, I feel like is a useful, uh, or I know what I mean by that. You know, trying to undo the what is your one favorite thing or whatever, and asking the question in a way where you kind of don't have to espouse a value about it. You can just say, oh, like this was interesting. I would have liked to have seen more than that. It's speculative. I feel like that can be wishy washy in some discussions, but this is maybe a good place for it. So, yeah, really cool. That was helpful to see. I liked that you gave the quotes example and the one key change and janky mechanics examples. That helps put together a picture of that, right? Like the quotes thing is you're just saying this is an interest, what a ponderous statement about life, right? It can be neutral if you want it to be. And then the one key change thing, you're kind of saying it's a thing about a thing that you're interested in. And then what if you added this to it or subtracted this? Cool. iPatch notes, good timing for some more comments about what makes for a good prompt. As a stream regular, you said, I think a topic of captains from the usual streams is the low-hanging fruit. I experienced some friction investing myself into a topic I have not already mulled over. Crew Parley is still something I'm learning how much I can fit in without crowding out other voices, voices that have been historically limited to just a few. Yeah, these are two good points. The low-hanging fruit thing is a big focus of mine. I feel like people in general are way too fetishizing of effort and don't focus enough on how much benefit there could be to like practically refusing to work hard and thinking hard, that is working hard of a sort, on how they could get a lot of value without doing much. And there is a lot of wasted value in the society we currently live in. A lot of utility and benefit you can gain, money you could have or save at least, that you don't get by working hard, because who cares about that? That's not valuable. What's valuable is providing utility. If it happens to be required that you work hard to do that, I think the virtue is that you are not too scrupulous to do that. You won't neglect too much to put in the work when you need to put in the work. But it is a virtue to not put in the work unless you are cornered into needing to do so, in my opinion. And again, just not be too stingy about that when it comes up. Whereas most people simplify that idea and say it's good to work hard, like for its own sake. And it's like, it's not. That's actually bad most of the time. Like, don't, gross. I don't know. Also, we're sadly mortal on this floating rock. Like, you don't waste your time. And so I do think for these, it's that I want you to get to interact with this and then jump out. For many people who have this service, sure, a lot of people have it from like a $5 Twitch Prime sub or something, but a lot of you have it with $9 Parley as well. You're gonna write a whole ass prompt. I mean, you don't have to write a big long prompt, but if you choose to do that, a lot of you pay for the service because you want to do that, and then you get my involved response to your really specific thing. That is one of the benefits of the service. If you have an involved thought, you can say all of it and someone will take the time to respond to it. That's what I like about it. So, on top of that, saying, hey, also invent an opinion to this arbitrary thing I said, right? I can understand why that is hard. And it's not the same thing as doing it on a stream. That's going to come up again later, where I can say the thing and then you have time to sort of be part of the discussion a bit and then maybe respond. This often it's like it will put you on the spot and then you leave and think you'll come back later to answer it, but then the month just goes by. I do often have a little bit more time for you to get a chance to respond to these. Usually there's, the Crew Parley going up in the middle of the month from the last month. That's intended to be like, hey, it's been half the month. If you wanted to respond to the Crew Parley from this month, you can do so. And of course, at the turn of the month, I don't like instantaneously record the Crew Parley. I have the little green checkbox on each prompt that indicates I put that on there when I hit beginning to record for a given prompt. So you usually have a little while, a couple of stops to think of it, but I completely understand that. That perspective is going to come up later from Ragnavar as well. I totally understand that take. Now, it's very difficult to figure out what to do with the very reasonable thought that, you may not be able to respond to a topic you haven't already mulled over. Because what topics people have mulled over is very one of the most subjective things, I feel like. It is interesting how people kind of converge on similar topics they've thought about over time. But it's interesting because it doesn't happen that much, but it happens a little, I think, anyway. So I definitely understand that. I'm not sure what a great way to do it is. This is where we could go back to the topic before about like not being too allergic to doing a tiny bit of like homework, something where the audience might need to briefly look something up and it would take like 30 seconds, but you don't have to really do anything. You would just need to go check that thing. One of Just Rusty's recommendations that we'll get back to in a minute is if I was going to make my own prompt for a real life one, I'd ask what slop your algorithm is currently serving you. What's something you're currently getting recommended over and over by whatever social feed you use, YouTube, Instagram, whatever, that you wish it would stop showing you. So that's one where you can see you could just go check that. And then it's like, yeah, I would have shied away from that topic because I feel like I'm asking the audience to go do an errand or something. But it's a really tiny errand, and people might have a lot of fun checking that and then comparing it to other people's experience. Maybe I ought to be a little less allergic to like a tiny little individual, like inciting incident thing. So I'll make myself a note about that I understand what that means. I feel like that could be useful, and it's a good way to show, you don't need to have molded over previously. Now, there's a separate side of this, which is that you might just not want to discuss something you haven't had time to think about on your own previously, and that's okay. To an extent, I would say that is sort of what this activity is, a little bit. For definitely for my part, that is what I want. I intend it to be. You haven't thought about this, and I want to know what people think. And I do think this is, in the grand scheme of humanity, a relatively good forum for doing such a thing. Hopefully, you'd agree, compared to what else you can have. But I still understand that perspective. Like that's okay. I think it is probably good to not try too hard to avoid that, but to still try to avoid it. So I think that's useful advice. I hope you understand why it sounds like you understand why, like it is kind of an unsolvable problem in some ways. But that is still a really good point. I really like the point about low hanging fruit as well. Again, they're not meant to be these super elaborate things as such, though sometimes the low hanging fruit has been picked. It's definitely true that for a lot of these, there is some basic thing that like we could be discussing that isn't that complicated that it would be very valuable to discuss. You got a type of coat hanger that you prefer? I don't know, like things like that. That's a stupid one, but that just aren't that involved that could still be really useful to share. Thinking about using the idea of crew parlay between us to gain benefits from this unique perspective we get to share, it seems useful to try to focus on things that are simpler things. Though this is hard to do, I think. It's hard as a human to kind of move back to like what are the basic suppositions of my view of reality and then use those as questions. That's challenging, but I think worth doing. I agree. I bet you continue. Granted, there might not be lightning to bottle exactly when the monthly cycle strikes. This is my idea that yes, people might not initially have a response, and then there could be problems with that. I generally prefer narrow topics like the janky mechanics and one key change myself. Okay, more votes for those. Open-ended questions like introduce an IP to an intellectual property to the rest of the crew, or volunteering one's personal history, ask a lot in my book for both the contributor and the audience, since there might not be a strong connection between everyone. Again, I will say that was my intention, that there is not a strong connection between everyone as such, and so it would be interesting to share people's different experiences. And this kind of comes up in another response as well. The idea that yes, it might not be an understandable perspective to other people on the surface, but this is a rare case where I think that can be good actually, because we have similar thought technology that can sort of get us on some common ground. Isn't it interesting that somebody who has actually thought about it and is in a community where you know, having seen them on streams or whatever, they've discussed this for like dozens of hours of their life, hundreds of hours of their life? Isn't it interesting how we may not agree on what the state of the gaming industry is? Like that the popular games in the gaming industry are usually pretty meh, and it's amazing how bad of a foot forward the game industry puts, and the good stuff is all like in the back, basically. I'm sure that not everybody agrees with that I just said. It's interesting how much disagreement there is, despite the fact that we know that this is not a random sample of people. It's not. Even you listening to this is not a random sample at all. This is a relatively strong selection pressure for people that have thought about it for some amount of time. Now, not thought about it in the same way necessarily, but I do think that that similar ground of like you have played some amount of games, for example, almost certainly. Not literally just that year's release of Call of Duty. Like you've played, a little bit around the gaming industry. That's not all the same starting point, but I do think it is a lot in a way, and can mean it's valuable to give like, yeah, maybe initially it seems like a totally irrelevant perspective, but that can be very valuable when it has the common ground of like it's at least coherent because we have a somewhat similar starting point. I respect this perspective that you don't prefer those. I do want to clarify that I intended you to feel that way, but just see it as a positive thing. And it's okay if you don't, that's fine. But I did do that on purpose. I guess I will clarify. I will mostly stop doing it on purpose. I think that a good example of this is the New Year's resolution bootcamp one. Yeah, asking people for their New Year's resolution, even for an insensitive jerk like me, who has no real perspective of what people feel comfortable sharing. I do think a lot of what people feel uncomfortable sharing is pretty arbitrary, but that goes for me as well. The thing I know is I don't have the same threshold for that as other people do. I know that. And so I completely accept fault here. Like I don't know anything about how that would make people feel. I just thought it would be interesting. So yeah, I'm sorry if that puts some people on the spot. I hope you'll agree it's no intense crime to have asked, but I get that one. That is pushing a little far into. Obviously, I'm not an idiot like that. I think that one is like you're asking for a lot of the person's personal life. I don't really intend to do that. I just honestly didn't see it that way initially when I wrote it. Now looking back, it's fairly obvious. Yes, sure. Now, all of that being said, I do want to say that I think the sort of oversharing that people often get worried about in this type of forum is a little, I guess, unwarranted as far as what we would allow. Like I'm happy for you to share that stuff if you're comfortable with it. I think that's okay, to a point. You know, as long as you're just saying this is a struggle I'm having in my life and I would like to share it, and that's okay. But I completely understand if people don't want to do that as well. Again, I feel like in some way that is a challenging one because it is a sort of growth question to ask. Probably most people don't want to answer that type of question for fun. I do actually, but I respect that realistically that's not going to happen, for sure. Mr. Fruit, you have three recommendations for questions and nothing else, so I'm going to come back to that toward the end. Reinvar, you have a direct continuation of iPatch Notes. I do definitely agree with iPatch Notes that most of the topics have been quite difficult to answer in a way that feels as sufficient as it could have gotten if it was instead posted during the streams. As topics are often very broad, and without the contextualization of an active discussion, it's hard to know where to go and what to land on with an answer. Again, I intended this, but I understand that that makes it hard to answer. I wanted people to go in weird different directions, but I understand that makes it harder to do, right? It's asking more of you. It's a selfish way to ask it. It can feel a bit like being a deer in the headlights when it comes to topics such as hard to recommend and the like. I could talk about anime and manga I like despite having aspects that feel rather behind the times or being better than the sum of their parts from my perspective, but easily not from someone else's. This is a really, really good part of the response. Yes, I feel like this is where I personally am going to argue no, that would be good if you did that. Like it's always true that people won't be coming from the same perspective, but we at least have a similar common ground to start from. So I think that type of response would be very good, really interesting. For someone to say, "Hey, here's this thing people tend to think is bad. I think it's good." And I'm not, you can have it on some authority that I'm not being completely disingenuous. I will take time to explain my point, is valuable. There are lots of topics where nobody ever does that. So, like, I don't think that it's my perspective is just correct. What I think is nobody ever objects to it in a way that is of any substance. There are people who say they disagree, but I can't get them to ever explain, or when they do, they're making a trivial point. But there definitely could be good points against this perspective I have. It's just that nobody will take the time to make them. This is one of the only types of forums where you could make such a claim. I think as long as you're willing to acknowledge that just is just how it is from your perspective, it's fine. I would also like to say that I think from your perspective is surprisingly objective in a way. I think an interesting thing about that type of comment is that there are many routes to further understanding with the subject, but I don't think that it's realistic to say there are infinitely many routes to understanding a subject. In other words, from your perspective, is not necessarily many people's perspective, but it's also not only your perspective, in my opinion. I feel like it's useful to think of it as that is one of the routes to what you currently understand. Some other people took that route, and therefore it would be relatable to other people to an extent, just not everybody. And watching or learning about the route someone else took to understanding a thing is fascinating, in my opinion. I have a feeling this is why. What was that one prompt that literally nobody answered? Which is fine, by the way. That was very helpful for this discussion. But we have to talk about that if we're gonna do this parlay, right? Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay. So the one that got no answers was what intellectual property makes a good game? And there were no responses. I opened it up for 2 months and there were still no responses, which is fine. That's okay. I'm not upset. It was just bad. um, but the thing I think is fascinating about one is that like you would have to say I like this thing and then it could make a good game. You know, like I was talking about before, this violates that principle that you're not asking the audience to like die on the hill of a thing. And also IP commercialization, well, it sounds bad. Most people are thinking, well, I don't like that, so I don't want one to be like that. I ought to have worded the question as something like, tell me your disaster stories of an intellectual property becoming a game. Something like that, right? But I would have loved a response to this that was someone going, okay, like, I think it's terrible when intellectual properties are made into games almost all of the time because of these market motivations. And then someone else would go, I also think that is terrible for some other market related motivations. And someone would go, well, I think it can be really fun, but just never is. And here's how it would be fun, but it just isn't. And then someone might go, oh, no, I feel like this is a good adaptation of an intellectual property, the blah, blah, blah. But understand what that would require. I mean, the person responding at the end, oh, I think games can be fun when they're adapted. Well, they need to be comfortable directly saying, well, but I have this contradicting opinion about this thing. And I know that people don't like to do that. It's just very valuable to do that. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. Like, it would be very good if we could find a way to do a prompt where people disagree, but in a way that they enjoy instead of finding stressful. I completely understand that people don't want to do that for a living. It's very comfortable to be in a mode where I just don't express my opinion about a thing because I don't care about it enough for people to hold it against me. I answered a comment this morning on one of the Parley videos that was about how I guess someone had understood in one of the Parley that I thought the developers of Warframe nerf things in Warframe too often or too much. I I don't have the time to watch through that whole thing to find the context for that comment. I don't really think that. I think they nerf too much when they nerf. That is, the nerfs are too big, are not balanced, basically. Nerf's good, unbalanced nerf's bad. That and I think that happens a lot of the time that there are nerfs that are done. Not that there are a lot of nerfs necessarily. And that like I don't really care about that opinion. You know what I mean? Like my ideal response to that situation would be, can I just delete that from your memory? Like it doesn't really matter. And of course, I know that this person doesn't really care about that either. They don't care about what I think. They're using it as a chance to pop off about something they are annoyed about. And I bet if you were to watch back through that parlay, you'd find that that's a pretty disingenuous interpretation of what I said, or at least I wouldn't be surprised if this was true. And they just wanted to say that thing, so they picked something that felt vaguely related and heard what they wanted to hear, and then said this annoyed thing that they wanted to say. I know that, but you see what I mean? Like that's annoying and not helpful. And so I kind of wish I could have just gone back and deleted whatever comment I made to that effect. Sure, you can't stop them all, but if I had to choose, I would not bother making that comment. You see what I mean? I'm aware that it can feel like this. It's just that this is a forum where I, at the very least, and hopefully your fellow commenters, will take pains to do nothing but take the concept in good faith. So I don't know. I mean, that's asking a lot of trust. Like I'm not trying to object to your preference to not do that. I should say that more often in this parlay. I'm not saying it's bad or weird that you don't want to do that. I'm just trying to show the other side of it while I largely avoid doing it in the future. But you will find a trend with me is that when I feel we're in a comfortable discussion and it seems like it is okay to discuss these things, we have time. I feel people are in the habit of not expressing contrary opinions, but it is good to do that and safe to do that, provided that you have time to discuss them. Maybe this isn't a good place to do that, but I do think it's a good thing to do. I guess I'm proposing a counter perspective to the idea that like that wouldn't be relevant to other people. I strongly disagree. I think it would be very interesting to people that were interested. Ragnavar, you continue. Alternatively, I could have talked about various games of many flavors I've enjoyed over the years, and how each have a gameplay fantasy, for lack of a better term, that really caught me. But that might not easily work for other people, which likely resulted in the game becoming just one more obscure niche title that many wouldn't have heard of, and thus why would I want to recommend it? Well, But that was exactly what I was hoping you would do. And in fact, I feel that is exactly what people did do with the hard to recommend parlay. Posted things that like are a janky recommendation, but they explained why it would be enjoyable. On the contrary, I hope I'm not harping on this too much. I just think your responses are very well targeted and I have a constructed response to them. That is why it would be a helpful recommendation. There are some games I can think of, some media properties in general I can think of, that I feel are so generalist that it doesn't bear much recommending. Like it would be that there would be something unusual and then you wouldn't like this. Probably not that you would need to have a certain quality to like it. it it's very broad, and so probably a lot of people would like it a good amount. And then you can just give it a try, have an okay time, and then maybe you'll really like it. Rather than it being something that only a very specific kind of person would want to enjoy. But that's the type of thing that's more helpful to give a recommendation for specific things. If there's something that you feel like, well, I enjoyed this specific thing, but I'm not sure that will apply to everyone, well, that's very valuable. Why did you enjoy it? And then, to some extent, just with that information, the audience can look through it and go, do I meet the qualifications to enjoy that? If I do, then I could go enjoy it. Again, there's a philosophical argument I'm making here that you may disagree with, and that's okay. But that philosophical argument is people can acquire other people's tastes. They're not like magically restricted to one person. So if you enjoyed it, there is a path to enjoying it that we could, in theory, also take. If you tell us what you liked about it, you are drawing a sketch of what that path was, and we might be able to follow it. If you don't give us a map of it, we almost certainly won't be able to follow it. There have been a lot of games like this in the past where I felt like, I'm not sure I'm really going to enjoy this, but somebody was able to give me a rough map of the path, and then I looked at it, metaphorically, and thought, yeah, I feel like I probably meet the qualifications for this to be entertaining. Let's go for it, sure. Likewise, the reverse of this might be something like, oh, someone recommended A Court of Thorns and Roses to me a little while ago. This is a popular romantasy franchise in the culture right now. And I, as politely as possible, tried to say, can you, to give me an idea of where you're coming from recommending this, can you tell me some other things that you've read recently? And they said, this is the only thing I've read recently. And that made me think, okay, it's most likely that that means that I've probably been reading too much for this to be a satisfying entry point into enjoying this lately. It will probably be accessible, but what to me will feel like accessible to a fault. I bet I'll like it fine. It's one of the most popular franchises in the modern age, I later found out. But I bet I will find it to be kind of just like not enough of some of the things it does. And I actually did read it in this case because I was doing an experiment with this. And I felt exactly that way. I felt like there were plenty of things that felt free of defect, but there just wasn't enough. It was like weirdly thin to me. And that made me think, huh, it's not, I thought it was bad, but I didn't think it did bad things very often. I just didn't have a fun time reading it by that much. But it was a different kind of unenjoyment. I just thought that I wanted more, right? And why did I want more? Well, I wanted more because the path I've been on, I'm already used to a certain level of that stuff. I think that's the most likely explanation. I wanted more world building. The world building that was there, I guess I liked fine. That wasn't really the problem. You see what I mean? It's different from, there are some things I actively disliked about that book. We don't have to get into it here, but like that wasn't the primary thing I disliked. I could tell you somewhat of the route that one could take to enjoying, I don't know, like the books I've been enjoying recently. And I think that's very valuable to do. I think it's surprisingly easy to do as long as you're willing to talk about things the way you do, Ragnavar. You're describing these things like, well, this is only my perspective on this, but I had this unique experience with it. That's the exact perfect way to present this information. So I, you don't have to. It's completely fine. I will shy away from these kinds of questions as best as I can, but what you're saying makes me want to ask them more, and that is why I think it would be good to ask that. It's not going to be relevant to everyone. None of the things any of us say are going to be relevant to everyone. So I think as long as you know that, that's exactly why I was hoping you'd recommend those things. To give one more example, my friends likely will fail to do this. Our perspectives are too similar. So they'll recommend things and it's like, okay, but we've kind of been on the same path through understanding our tastes. And so you probably won't be able to recommend too many things that I haven't just also experienced. And thus it's hard. We have the unique privilege of being in a situation where we have similar, again, like thought technology or tools, a common format or forum to discussion, but not very similar on the ground experiences. This means we're in the unique position of being able to reach a common understanding about things we do not have in common having experienced. That is usually very difficult. Like if you go on a random coffee date with someone, probably won't work. You need to establish a lot of common language, sort of, like terminology, thought technology is what I call it, to understand where they're coming from about these recommendations, context as well. Friends, well, it's probably the opposite problem. You may share too much context. But this weird group of colleagues, the crew, oh yeah, I feel like that's the situation where it can totally work. So I don't know. We don't share as much thought technology as I wish we did. And maybe now we share more. I hope you don't mind me going on about this for a while. You just really hit the nail on the head of a thing, one of the biggest things I wanted to talk about in this parlay. So thank you. Good job. It's completely fine if you don't want to do that or don't prefer that. But I do think it would be good, though. That's the only thing I'm trying to object to. I don't agree that that means it wouldn't be good to do that. But you don't want to do that or would prefer not to. You speculate that my guess that it would be fun for people is wrong and other people wouldn't enjoy it. That's fine. I maybe. But I was thinking that would be fun when I recommended a lot of these topics. Anyway, it also might just be me gushing about something like Armored Core 4 Answer because I really like that game, despite its flaws, purely on vibe and gotta go fast gameplay energy that I've not found elsewhere, even in Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon. Although I also really love that game too, it's just not the same, which is probably a good thing, as series stagnation is bad and leads to the age old issue of the series becoming a shell of its former self, only perpetuated for the sake of profit, but still, it's different, more polished, but lacking something that personally made Armored Core 4 Answer what it is. Yeah, I would be interested to see you try to drill that down. Now, obviously, you're raising a reasonable point here that sometimes the perspective you have is just self indulgence, sure. I think it's completely fine to go ahead and say that and then just say, I think this might just be self indulgence. I feel like a lot of the time, people with the presence of mind to notice that, you err on the side of not saying things that are self indulgent. And so it might actually be quite interesting. What is it about Armored Core 4 Answer that maybe there was something lost as the genre advanced, but it was still overall good that the genre advanced? Like, there, I bet you could kind of find the ballpark area for that. I would be interested to hear such a thing. But I also hear the other side of this discussion, which is that it can be indulgent. This is the type of advice where it's like, I don't want to. If we were talking to the general public, I wouldn't say this. I want to say this for people that would be involved enough in this community that they would want to do Crew Parley. For the general public, yeah, maybe those people are not statistically fully aware of how irrelevant the thing that they're excited about is, and that's also fine. It's okay to be excited about it. But yes, I think a lot of people, numerically, a lot of people fall into the fallacy that this is exciting to me, so it's objectively exciting. It's not. But if you already know that, I think it can often be pretty helpful to see like what would you bother to talk about anyway. And it's fine. You gush about a thing you like, that's okay. I just wanted to say that is welcome. Obviously within reason, but like you can totally do that here. With topics that big, I often look at the prompt for a few minutes, try and think about it and come up with an answer, then get lost in the sea of different directions I could go to answer it. Then, when nothing strikes me as the thing I'd want to bring up, I remember I have a whole month to think about it, and then forget to do so. Hell, I'm only now writing this as I was looking at the next prompt, and reminded that I wanted to formulate some sort of response to air out this feeling, for lack of a better term, I've had around the crew parlay for a while now. I don't really have a solution, the topics are interesting, I just have trouble answering them on my own time. But I wonder whether it would be interesting or beneficial to discuss the prompt a little in one of the streams, probably a Friday stream, the tea time streams, to help get some conversation going around the prompt, to make it easier for people like myself to come up with an answer. as we often cover similarly big topics on streams without issue, at least from my perspective. That's a very good point. So it could be fun and or useful. That's a fantastic idea. Yep. And I can definitely see this being a case where creating context could be all it takes. I had thought initially about making videos for each of the prompts, and I don't think it's a great idea to make public Pantaloon Saloon videos that are only the prompt for each month. That might be an okay idea, but I don't think it is. I feel like that channel already has a ton of uploads going on, and I want it to be that they're dense. It would both probably get buried, and it's not relevant except to people that want to participate in the thing. But I could just make a short video and make it like unlisted and available here, if that would be interesting. We could try that at the very least. I'm also definitely down for discussing the things on streams. That's a great idea. Bring up topic on stream. Add more context. Maybe it's just helping people find a direction. And of course, having a video go up publicly would be one more stop where you might remember, oh, I wanted to answer that. I've thought about it for a little while. Now I'll go answer it. Again, there's the beginning of the month, the previous month's Crew Parley going up. The end of the month, you kind of get a chance to do that too. But I definitely like the idea of the Friday streams being a place for it as well. A lot of people who have this service are here because they have it through Twitch. They have a Twitch sub or whatever, and that gives them access to my $5 tier. I treat that as the same, even if you didn't pay for it, if it's Twitch Prime. You paid for it, but it's part of Amazon Prime. I treat that as the same, and so a lot of that crowd are people who are on the streams. So it makes a lot of sense. It's a pretty elegant solution. And the $5 tier will always be populated significantly with people from the streams because that's the most common place people would do a $5 pledge, right? On the Patreon, you can choose a cheaper option if you want to, and you can choose a more expensive option. You can do that on Twitch, but it's not the normal sub people get gifted. It's not Amazon Prime's Twitch Prime. You know, the $5 tier is more typical. So that makes a lot of sense. We should definitely regularly do that. Or I could even refine prompts that I'm thinking about. I'll put that in the notes for the stream. That's a very good suggestion. You finished up. Then again, I've said before about the game dev advice about player feedback. Your players will know what is wrong, but they won't know how to solve it, even if they think they do. I could be going about it the wrong way with my suggestion. I just wanted to have a suggestion to get the ball rolling a little, as that is the theme of this, well, no, last month's Crew Parley. No, not at all, Ragnavar. I thought you did a very good job. I agree that in general, that dev advice holds true, but I think you all are in a fairly different position from just players of a game. I think you are on the level of official beta testers of a thing, where, yeah, you kind of do have the language to say what is specifically wrong, and I just appreciate that you have the humility to say, oh yeah, I don't know for sure. I'm going to say the same thing. But realistically, we do need to be arrogant at some point and say, yeah, I think it's this. I'm gonna say, okay, it would be better to go with this. I think all of your suggestions were completely reasonable, make total sense. I have objections to some of them, or I don't completely agree with the premises for some of them, but they make total sense. I mean, Ragnavar, for example, it's more a case where there's an argument for doing the thing I was suggesting anyway, but the thing you said is undeniably a feeling other people feel. Like, there's no question that the idea that, oh, but it wouldn't be relatable to other people is a concern people have. And we can never really know whether I'm also correct that, like, okay, but maybe pushing through that is good. But will people want to do that? Well, but maybe it's worth the effort to try to convince people to do that. Yeah, but maybe it's not comfortable and it's kind of meant to be a service. Like, those are both good arguments. Like, I think that makes total sense. Uh, let's go through and finish up with some of your recommendations for what would make fun Crew Parley, which I will totally just be doing all of in the future because I thought they were all pretty good recommendations. So we talked about this one before. Just Rusty, you said if I was going to make my own prompt for a real life one, I'd ask what slop is your algorithm currently serving you? What's something that you're currently getting recommended over and over by whatever social feed you use, YouTube, Instagram, whatever, that you wish it would stop? Sure, I think a fun one where you can just check, say something that feels unrelated to you, and then move on. I could see people feeling like, is that too personal? But I don't know. I feel like that's a good, like, tiny homework one, if you will. I like that idea. I don't know for mine. Shall we do it right now? Just quickly. Oh no, I have to be logged into it. I'm uploading a video at the same time. I'm on the Pantaloon Saloon account. Well, I'll do it for the Pantaloon Saloon account, yeah, but I barely surf on these accounts. I barely scroll on any account at all. The point being, it's probably going to be pretty monolithic. Like, what is this feed? It's all okay. It's literally all D&D and Magic the Gathering. Ooh, there's some writing advice. Uh, AI ruining people's careers. Got it. A little bit of music, probably because of those parlay that are like, oh, you like need to, listen to this song and then respond to it in some way. Okay. Was this mechanic a failure? Yeah, no, no, no. Okay. And you know what? As a result of me watching so few things, these are all on target recommendations in terms of general topic. I don't want to watch every single one of these videos, but it's not my primary account, so I actually have watched a good amount of those videos. They were just recommended to me on my primary personal account. Interesting. Anyway, for a gaming one, I'd ask, what are you looking for in a sequel to a game? Do you prefer a sequel which hones a formula, gives more of the same, or one that and but takes on lessons learned in the previous title, or which radically departs from the original to break new ground? Great. Yeah. It's a nice one because again, it does that thing where you can say a nebulous, you don't have to die on the hill of being positive or negative. And you've played a game, just think of a game you've played that doesn't have a sequel that you'd like more of in some way. Or you could, I would like to include the possibility in that prompt that is like a game had a sequel and you didn't like it, or it did this, but I would be interested in a sequel that did that instead, or as well as that. Cool. I bet someone will be able to think of an example that was both a game that has multiple sequels, one of which is one kind of sequel and one of which is the other kind of sequel. That sounds not that hard. I might be able to think of one of those right now. Anyway, and Mr. Food, bringing it on home. There are three questions I'd like the Parley community to answer for me. I think there could be some interesting responses. Mr. Food, you told me that you wrote down like 15 of these, so I kind of just want all of them. But let's read through them. One, is there a moment from a game that haunts you, one you cannot stop thinking about even weeks and months after experiencing it? If so, what are those moments? I have some that come to mind, but I want to hear other people's moments. Interesting one. One thing we can look at with these is, do they fit the advice I was just given about doing prompts better? And I think that this one mostly does. I feel like the idea of a prompt where you say, what is the thing you're constantly thinking about? Like the quote one, for example. The hope is, well, you might just have it immediately. And then there you go, if you're happy to share it. Again, something sort of sets off my, do people not want me to do this alarm about, am I asking something too personal? But evidently people liked some of those prompts, so I guess it's maybe fine. I think that is an interesting one. That sounds cool. That haunt, can I think of one though? Again, this is one where I fear though some people will be put on the spot about it a little bit. So, I mean, some memorable things from games for me. Yeah, I can think of some of those. A lot of them, it's like haunts, though. Like, cannot stop thinking about even weeks or months after experiencing it. Is this a positive or negative feeling? Like, maybe it's haunting or not. Although you could say haunt, maybe you want one that's not negative, but like that feels eerie in some way. I don't know. That one's tricky. Overall, I really like it. I think it would be fun to try, but yeah. Two, what is everyone's experience with total conversion mods? There's a set of mods out there that fundamentally change the game they are built on top of, becoming their own thing. Convergence mod for Dark Souls 3, Elden Ring, Enderal, Fallout, London, Terraria Calamity, Super Mario Star Road, etc. These are games that have convergence mods. Okay, got it. Or total conversion mods. Some change mechanics, some replace the levels, some expand the game vertically, and some do all of the above and more. I want to know about people's experiences with these. Cool. Yeah, this is kind of like game recommendations, but total conversion mods. A very interesting idea. This is a case where people probably haven't played too many of these, I would imagine, most people. And so hopefully there's an interesting one, or you don't like the idea of them for some reason, and you could say, yeah, again, I'm worried about, I want to adequately encourage people to say if they don't like the idea of these because I think that's interesting. There's an argument to be made that, there's so many good games. Why do you need to make a modified version of an existing one? But there are some arguments for that being an interesting idea. And three, what is everyone's favorite TTRPG character they've played with and why? Is there a build in there? Maybe some dynamic storytelling? I want to know all about it. Love this one. I definitely worry that favorite, again, this is like a textbook, like Wii U favorites question, where I want to say something like, can you think of any like really memorable TTRPG characters, or would you be interested in making a party built of interesting your and friends TTRPG characters? You could even include NPCs. Is there an NPC you've had in a campaign that you really want to play? An NPC in a video game that you really want to play as? Something like that. Maybe that's expanding it too much. Again, I worry that there's a tension when I do that, just the thing I do, where I'm trying to include other people's interpretations of the prompt, but maybe that's bad because it makes it feel too open-ended, where I'm just saying, okay, whatever response you have, just go ahead and give that. And I worry that people don't respond to them even though they want to, because they have a response that they feel like doesn't fit, and that just doesn't really matter most of the time. Like, go ahead. But maybe I'm causing a problem by doing. I do that in almost all of the prompts, so maybe that's bad. I don't know. That's why I'm doing that. I freely admit, it's kind of delightful actually, as somebody who makes a business entirely on having a perspective on a thing. I feel I am devastatingly bad at this subject. Like I have no idea. To be honest, I don't know what the problem is most of the time. But I can think of many things it could be, as you can tell. So I'm incredibly grateful that you all gave so many interesting responses and ideas for your own prompts. And it's a fun thing to learn. But I freely admit, if you made me pick some of my biggest weaknesses as a human being, I would put this in the top three. Like how to get people to like actually talk to you about something. My life story is people won't do that no matter what I do. Like yeah, I'll do anything to get people to do that. But I don't find success as often as I'd like. Now, no shade to people in my personal life. A lot of it has been that for whatever reason, I've attracted quieter people. And I've been told before by people in my personal life that that's because I am a good listener when they are ready to talk. They don't want to talk that much, but I'm willing to listen when they do. This makes it possible to not talk all the time and have an effective relationship with good communication as such. You make the most of the communication you have. But I hunger. So I'm looking forward to that. This is a primary reason I wanted to make a community, which I didn't initially really, but this is one of the things I want out of it. So I really appreciated these responses. Thank you. They mean a lot to me. I'm looking forward to employing them going forward. And I hope that my rebuttals to some of your points don't come across as me saying it's like wrong at all to feel that way about them, just to say that I do think there's another side for some of these, and I wouldn't want someone to not respond because they thought they shouldn't respond that way, but you're perfectly welcome to. If you don't want to, that's obviously completely fine. I'm not trying to say you like it's silly to think that it is bad to respond this way. I just want to show the other side so that if you would like to talk about that, but you're not sure it's a good idea, you feel like I think it's mostly good to talk about these things. I at the end of these, I've been reading what the prompt for the next month is. So for August, the next prompt is most and or least favorite genre terms. What labels have you consistently liked or disliked? It would be fun to hear some speculation about why that might be as well. Obviously, almost all such terms are oversimplifications, but even if you think that, I bet you've come to feel like there are exceptions, certain genre terms that you feel are more consistently good or bad. This could be in games and or other media, like books or TV shows. Feel free to include one you like, one you dislike, or both. When in doubt, interpret this more open-endedly. Looking forward to your responses. You can see that I employed some of the things that I had already read in the prompts from this parlay. I totally did that. I read ahead a little bit. And looked at some of the ones people said they thought were good and tried to emulate them without having the full opportunity to go through these responses and talk about them for an hour. I hope you thought I did okay. If you'd like to respond to those, we'd love to have you. Many of you listening to this already have access to these. Again, if you're at the $5 tier anywhere, the biggest group of you is as Twitch subscribers, so check that. If Discord and Twitch are hooked up, you have access to this. And if you'd like to join us, it's the $5 tier. You can support the entertainment that I make and join us for these. We'd love to have you. You can do that using a link in the description. Anyway, see you in the next one. Looking forward to it. And thanks again. This meant a lot to me.